Hello everybody, we are back with another edition of weekly MMA talk. I'm Michael Hutchinson, your host, and today we have a very special episode. Of course, this weekend is UFC Ottawa, which features the headlining fight of Rory MacDonald against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Just an incredible fight, one of the fights that I just can't believe is happening. I'm just drooling over it. I can't believe that we're finally seeing this fight. And on today's episode, we have one of the two headlining people. We have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He joins us later in the show. We talk about the fight, him having to fight somebody in Rory MacDonald who's such a dangerous fighter, but also a friend. And one thing I have to say about Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is he's one of the most friendly people that I've ever talked to. And so it's kind of funny seeing him now having to fight a friend, because you're not only getting a really friendly guy, but somebody who has to fight a friend. You'd think that wouldn't go together, but again, they're fighters, so they'll deal with it in the octagon and then be friends afterwards. So we have him on the show a little bit later. We also have another fighter from UFC Ottawa, Elias Theodorou, in my opinion, the best looking middleweight. He joins the show. We talk about everything from his hair, which again is just gorgeous, to his last fight, which is a fight where he obviously underperformed. He didn't do that well, and how he's going to bounce back from his first professional loss. So that is the show today. Next week, we will actually be off, so there won't be a show next week, unfortunately. But hopefully after that, we will be back with bigger guests, more fights. After this event, we have the whole entire UFC 200 weekend, which features 3 shows, a crap ton of title fights, and Brock Lesnar, which is representing Canada. How crazy is that? Brock Lesnar comes back and everybody's just like, oh, Brock Lesnar's back, this is crazy. And then he decides, yeah, you know what, I'm going to fight as a Canadian. Okay, I'm down with that. I think every Canadian that I've seen, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook, whether or not they watch MMA, whether or not they're just like fringe fans who only watch for Brock Lesnar, everybody's super pumped about him fighting for Canada. I think that's one of the most awesome things I've heard of. I don't know, Canada usually were represented by guys like Georges St. Pierre, Rory MacDonald, not super intimidating, nice, quiet, polite guys, lower weight classes. And now we have this behemoth, Brock Lesnar, coming from Saskatchewan. It just, for some reason, it fits. It feels wrong, but it also feels right. It's very, very odd, but I can't wait to see Brock Lesnar back wearing a Reebok gear that's the Canadian Reebok gear. Hopefully he'll have like the tail of the tape thing have Canada. I think they might do Born though, so it'll probably still be USA. But man, if you told me, hey, Brock Lesnar's coming back, what? Yeah, he's fighting at UFC 200. What? Yeah, he's fighting Mark Hunt. What? Yeah, and he's also going to fight out of Canada. What the hell? That makes no sense, but that's where we're at. That's just absolute craziness. So yeah, that's in a couple of weeks. That event is, what is that, like July 9th? July 7th? Oh, wow, I was right. Damn, those UFC advertisements, they're got that date drilled into my head. We have Dos Anjos versus Alvarez on July 7th. Then we have Team Joanna versus Team Claudia the next day, the tough finale. And then UFC 200, Cormier versus Jones too. So July 7th, 8th, and 9th, a crazy weekend. And then before all of that, we have on June 18th, which is this Saturday, the MacDonald versus Thompson card. So we have a lot of weeks in between where there are no fights. I guess that's why we're going on vacation for a week from this show, just because there's not a whole lot happening. And also this weekend, there's a ton of other stuff happening. I just got an email from Mookie Alexander, one of my editors from Bloody Elbow, and it was like the event sheet and saying how many MMA events there were this weekend. And there are a ton. Of course, Fedor is making his return, I guess, kind of return. He retires, then unretires all the time. He's fighting Fabio Maldonado. And something he does before every single fight, I swear, I don't care when Fedor says anymore that he's coming back to the UFC. Why? Because or not coming back to the UFC, signing with the UFC, that talks are better than they've ever been before. He always says that stuff right before he's about to fight. Why? Because then everybody talks about, oh, Fedor, he's coming back to the UFC, but he also fights Maldonado on this weekend on UFC Fight Pass. He does that in order to get people to talk about him, and then they see his fight, and he's like, nah, I'm just messing with you, I'm not coming to the UFC. But thanks for watching my fight. So I really, really doubt he's going to be in the UFC. I think, again, he's just throwing that out there in order to get people to watch this fight. So yeah, we have UFC Ottawa on Saturday. We have a Bellator card on Friday, a World Series of Fighting card on Friday, and then the Fedor fight on Friday. So a lot of MMA action this week. But like I said at the top of the show, we have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on the show to talk about this weekend's fight. And I can't even explain how excited I am for this Rory MacDonald Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight. I've been a huge fan of Rory MacDonald since the beginning, since his fight with Carlos Condit, seeing him rise up as GSP's protege. And a lot of people, when you hear about these proteges, it's just like, oh, well, they'll kind of just die out eventually. We're brought up way too soon, don't accomplish much. But MacDonald has shown that, man, he is tough. His fight with Robbie Lawler was absolutely insane and showed that MacDonald, damn, he is a tough guy. And that's actually his last fight. He has been gone for a long time. What was the Robbie Lawler fight? July 11th, 2015. So it will have been a year since he fought. So hopefully he's recovered, because that was just a brutal fight. But again, it just reminded me why I'm such a huge Rory MacDonald fan. And then he's going up against Steve Wonderboy Thompson, whose fight against Johnny Hendricks just absolutely flawless. Me and him talk about that a little bit. Watching that fight, I had interviewed him before the fight, and whenever I interview people, I always know who's the underdog going into the fight. I always know who's the favorite. And maybe you can kind of hear it in my voice when I talk to a fighter. It's just like, oh, well, this is a pretty tough fight. And when it's not a tough fight, it's just like, oh yeah, you're fighting this guy. How do you expect to win? And when I was talking to Wonderboy, I was like, man, you're fighting the former champion. He's really good. Do you think you're ready? You're the big underdog. I don't know how you're going to do. Anyone did that. Just mind-blowing. And now if he does the same to Rory MacDonald, boom, guaranteed title shot. Man, he could be a dominant champion. Not getting too ahead of ourselves, because Robbie Lawler is a bad man. And he's fighting Tyron Woodley. Actually, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson talks about that being overlooked for the Tyron Woodley fight in our interview, which, I mean, I've been teasing this interview for the whole entire intro, so I'm going to get to that right now. Here is my interview with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, the headlining act of UFC Ottawa this Saturday. Here we go. All right, our first guest on today's show is none other than the headliner himself, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Stephen, how are you doing?
Doing great, my friend. Doing great. Glad to be on with you, man.
Well, thanks for joining the show. Now, I'll start off with the last time when we spoke. It was right before the big press conference, and there was word that you might be fighting a guy named Rory MacDonald, but you were very tight-lipped. Now, we know that you're fighting Rory MacDonald, so how did this bout come about?
Well, after the win over Johnny Hendricks, I was expected to get the title shot after that, finishing Solani in the first round, the former welterweight champion. And but sometimes you got to go out there and you got to prove once again to the UFC and to the fans that you deserve that title shot. I'm ranked number 2 right now. Roy's number 1, and he's the only guy that's ranked above me besides Robbie Lawler. So it's going to be on, man, and it's going to be on June 18th in Ottawa, Canada.
Yeah, I can't wait for that fight. I got the Canadian flag hanging right behind me. Unfortunately, I won't be at the event. But you're fighting a guy in Rory McDonald who you fought at TriStar for a bit, or trained at TriStar for a bit. Were you and him ever training partners, and was there any hesitation taking the fight?
Well, it did kind of sting knowing that I was going to be fighting, a buddy of mine, a guy that I've known for a while. I did, train at TriStar for many years. This is actually before I even started MMA, just being a sparring partner up there with George. So, me and Rory, we never sparred with each other, but we kind of drilled, wrestling. This was before I was even doing MMA, and, just going up there and hanging out with those guys. And me and Rory fought on the same cards. And, so we kind of developed a pretty good relationship. And, but, we both understand that it's business. And when you're at the top of the game, sometimes you got to fight a friend, and win or lose, we're going to be friends after the fight. But we're going to go out there and try and put it all out on the line, man. I mean, a win for both of us could be another title shot. So it's important, and it's a very dangerous fight. Roy's the best well-rounded fighter that I've faced so far.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you started training at TriStar for George St. Pierre in preparation for his fight with Carlos Condit. Is that correct?
That is correct. So I was there for Carlos, John Fish, Thiago Alves, just kind of going back and forth, getting some training in with those guys. They were actually going up there training with them. It was kind of my inspiration to switch over from kickboxing to mixed martial arts.
Nice. Well, you were one of George St. Pierre's main training partners for his title defenses. Do you have anybody coming into your camp to mimic Rory McDonald?
I was going up to New York training with Chris Weidman because we both had fights fairly close together. I wasn't able to make it up there the last week just because he ended up herniating 4 discs in his back. So, but what better guy to train with, especially somebody like Rory, than Chris Weidman. Mm-hmm. He's helped me so much with my wrestling defense, my ground game, going up there and training with those guys. It's been great. So he's been my main sparring partner.
And actually, speaking of Chris Weidman, I believe either today or yesterday he had surgery. Do you have any updates on him?
I think he's doing great. I think the surgery was successful. Mm-hmm. But I haven't had a chance to text him yet today, but I'll probably end up doing that right after I get off the phone with you and see how he's doing. So I think everything went well.
All right, that's good to hear. So this is the 3rd event in a row where you're the headliner. You've been doing a lot of these FS1 cards, Fight Pass cards. Are you kind of hoping that the next time you fight, it's going to be in a main event of a pay-per-view or on pay-per-view, or do you not care about that, and do you actually like the exposure of being main event for so-called free TV?
You know what? I think it's great being, headlining those shows just because I feel that more people are apt to watch it if it's free. You know what I mean? But after this, yeah, man, I mean, I don't want to look past Roy because Roy is the man. He's number one contender, been at the top of the game for a long time, but hopefully a win over him will give me that next title shot, and it will be on pay-per-view, and hopefully, headlining one of them.
And speaking of you being on free TV, recently you were on the desk at Fox for UFC 198. How did that whole thing come about?
Man, that was actually really cool. My management company, Paradigm Management, actually hooked me up with that. I was looking and thinking about, doing something like that, and being an analyst for one of the UFC shows, and they said that, I feel very comfortable in front of the camera, and why not give it a shot? So I was out there with, Kenny Florian, DC, and it was great, man. It was a really cool experience, and I had a blast, and hopefully we can do it again.
Well, you did a great job. I hope to see you on the desk again. Switching topics, we've talked a few times before, and one time I mentioned that you should consider changing your name from Wonderboy to Superman. Have you given that any more thought?
I really haven't, to be honest with you. Man, everybody's been saying that when you're going to switch your name, but as of right now, me walking out to walking out to Tenacious D's Wonderboy, I want to continue to keep the name Wonderboy for now. I love that song, man. I love walking out to it because it definitely puts a smile on my face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no complaints about the name. It's a wonderful name. Just, I think that it would be appropriate if you did win the title to go from Wonderboy to Superman. That would be a cool little thing to do.
Yeah, that would be cool, man. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. So you're fighting a completely different guy in Rory McDonald from Johnny Hendricks. I was actually just so surprised how you performed against Johnny Hendricks. Did you see that coming? And did you think that you would be able to knock out a former champion in just one round?
I never expected that in a million years. And I was prepared to go 5-5 in a row because I knew how tough Johnny Hendricks was. He's been 10 rounds with Robbie Lawler, the champion now. And, I mean, the guy's taken some shots and just has never gone down like that. But I think a lot to do with it was with my style, frustrating him out there. There was a few points where he just kind of dropped his hand and shook his head, and that's exactly when I knew when I had him. Just being able to hit him without getting hit back, I think was the key to help, for the frustration. Once I got you frustrated, I know I have you. And, yeah, man, it was just so surreal, to be honest with you. I never thought in a million years I would be finishing him in the first round, but everything just worked out perfectly. Every shot that I knew I could land on him landed, and it was just over, man. It was just my night.
I think it was surreal for everybody watching. Me, I was in complete amazement. I knew that you could do it, but just not like that. And you said that you expected a hard 5-round fight. There's nobody tougher in the division, maybe Robbie Lawler, but nobody tougher than Rory McDonald. Do you expect this to be a hard-fought 5-round fight?
Oh, definitely. I think it's going to be action-packed. I think the fans are going to really love to tune in to watch this fight. Yeah, man, he's a tough guy. I mean, you saw him go out there and just take some shots from Robbie Lawler, and he just kept on coming. So I expect, man, a 5-in-a-round war. And mentally, for me to be ready for this fight, for me to be confident, I have to be ready for that.
And I can't wait for the fight. It's one of the most interesting top contender fights of the year. And it is a top contender fight. You're not a guy who gets upset or mad often. Would you be mad or upset if you don't end up getting a title shot with an impressive win?
Oh, definitely. I would definitely be upset. I mean, I would feel that maybe, if I don't get that title shot, something's wrong, man. I mean, a win over Johnny Hendricks, a win over Rory, has to give it to me. I would definitely be upset. Yes. I'm putting my foot down.
Yeah, and I assume that you would get the title win unless something like the Robbie Lawler Tyron Woodley fight, if that ends up in a draw or something, or controversy. What do you think of there being so many rematches in the UFC right now, and would you be upset if there was a rematch for that fight?
Man, yeah, kind of. I mean, if let's say Tyrone does get the shot, he has defended the title. Robbie's defended the title many times, so he deserves it. I would be upset if it goes that way, just in the fact that Robbie didn't do what I thought he was going to do. I think Robbie's going to beat Tyrone. I think Tyrone has been out of the game for a little while. I mean, he does have an explosive shot, but Robbie Lawler's takedown defense is phenomenal. You saw that against Rory and Johnny Hendricks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to be honest, I think you should have gotten the title shot, but instead, we have this fantastic fight. I cannot wait to watch this, and I'm being serious when I said this is my most anticipated fight of the year. Good luck at UFC Ottawa. I can't wait to watch this fight.
Oh, thank you, my friend. And you know what? I mean, I'm really excited. Been training hard. Just got done training right now. So, man, just don't blink, my friend. It's going to be a war.
I can't wait to see it. Thanks, Wonderboy.
Anytime, brother. Have a good one.
So there you have it. That is my interview with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So happy to have him on the show. I've interviewed him a bunch of times before, and he always brings a certain excitement. Some fighters, you can just tell that they don't want to be doing interviews. And with Stephen, it doesn't even feel like an interview. It just feels like we're talking. So thank you for joining the show, Stephen. Very, very happy to have you. And it's special for me as a guy who hasn't done a whole lot in the sport to have a guy who's fighting in the headliner of this weekend's big fight card to come and join me. So very, very appreciative of that. And again, I've said this already 100 times on this podcast, cannot wait for that fight. We do not often get the number 1 contender against the number 2 contender. That hardly ever happens in this sport. And when it does happen, it's very special. I think the last time that happened was Frankie Edgar against Chad Mendes. Everybody was so pumped for that fight. Why? Because it was the number 1 contender against the number 2 contender. 2 of the baddest men in the division who haven't fought each other yet. And everybody's like, oh, we're not really sure where these guys stack up. Nobody knew that Frankie Edgar was going to knock out Chad Mendes. That was so far out of left field. And then with this Roy McDonald, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight, it's like, damn, who's going to win? I have no idea. Like, Roy could easily win this fight, but then again, Stephen Thompson could easily win this fight. And it could easily be a 5-round war where we don't know who wins at the end. Anything can happen in this fight. It is a fascinating fight. And it's only a couple of days away. Oh, I cannot wait. I wish I was in Ottawa for this fight. We were going to travel out to Ottawa. I was hoping to get media credentials and stuff, but unfortunately, I am not able to get media credentials at this time. Hopefully, in the future, I'll be able to go to UFC events, cover the events there, get interviews with fighters. But unfortunately, at this time, I am not at that level. Maybe I could get to that level in the near future. We will see. And then I was going to travel and just go as a fan, but part of me would have been depressed that I wasn't there as media because I would have seen all my media friends and like, I wish I was there with you guys. But then there's also the fact that it's expensive, and then traveling to Ottawa is a little expensive right now. I'm a student. I'm just like, I'm on the grind. So I'll miss this event, watch it at home, and hopefully the next time the UFC comes to Canada, specifically Ontario, I'm there with the media. So that's my goal for the next time the UFC comes to Ottawa. But again, I can't wait. Donald Cerrone against Patrick Cote, the co-main event. And then we have the Fight Pass. What do they call it? The Fight Pass main event? I think that's what they call it. Fight Pass featured prelim. That's what they call it. The UFC Fight Pass featured prelim is Elias Theodorou against Sam Alvey, which is, again, a very interesting fight. Elias, of course, in his last fight, lost. It was a very brutal fight for him because in the first round, he was doing really, really well. And then the second and third round, it looked like he not gassed, but it was just he stopped doing what he was supposed to do. And Thiago Santos just took over, won the next 2 rounds, bloodied Elias up. And it was his first loss. And I know that he probably took that like really to heart. Having your first loss, that's always really tough for any fighter. But then again, some fighters, when they have their first loss, it destroys them. And then some bounce back and make that their defining career moment where, hey, I lost this fight, I learned what not to do, go on and be a champion. So I guess we'll see what happens with Elias when he fights Sam Alvey. And we got to talk to Elias. So I'm going to roll the interview now for the Elias Theodorou interview. A little side note for this interview, unfortunately, you see this mic here? Well, during the interview, usually I speak in the mic and then the person speaks to me, but this mic, it doesn't pick up their sound. Unfortunately, this mic got unplugged during our interview, so this entire interview's sound was recorded on my camera mic, which picked up his audio, so there is a large echo in the audio. I tried fixing that in post-production. There wasn't much I could do. So unfortunately, there is an awkward echo in this interview. Hopefully it doesn't ruin everything. You can pretty much tell what he says during the entire thing. But I'll let you listen. Here it is, my interview with Elias Theodorou. Check it out. All right, so you guys know Luke Rockhold. You guys know Chris Weidman. You think that they're the most handsome middleweights in the UFC, but they're not. This guy is Elias Theodorou. He joins us now. Elias, thanks.
Well, I appreciate the introduction.
No problem. So the last time me and you talked, we were in Toronto at Grant's MMA. I had my tag team of journalist friends set up the interview. But now you're off in Montreal at TriStar. When did you make that move?
Well, I made the move for this camp around I want to say February. But I've been coming here on and off. Now just a more permanent stay.
Okay. And did it have anything to do with the fact that your last fight ended up being the first loss of your career?
Yeah, definitely. Whether you win or lose, you have to go back to the drawing board. And obviously, with my first loss, be it a close one, I'm actually really proud of it. Especially against a game opponent like Thiago Santos, who is who's on a tear in his own right. And I'm the only one to take him to a decision, and a close one at that. But being my first loss, I needed to learn from it. And part of the things that I learned is just the travel time in regards to Toronto is not acceptable. Unfortunately, to get the adequate training, there's a lot of driving. And being in TriStar, being close to it, along with Titans MMA, which I am training at, and a couple other gyms as well, I'm actually saving 17 hours in my week of travel. So that just allows me to train and focus, and obviously the great partners that I get to be with. I had a great 4 or 5 weeks in New York when I was there, but it wasn't but it was only a great 4 weeks. I need to be somewhere, honestly, for months at a time, just evolving the skill set that I have. And I think in many ways, this is the best thing for me.
Mm-hmm. And there's obviously a lot of superstars at TriStar. Do you think you're getting the attention that you deserve? Because you were kind of the top guy in most gyms that you went to, but now you're not the top 1-2 guy.
Well, again, it's very quick out. It's a family. Everyone gets attention. Obviously, working with Raz is always a great thing, and I have a lot. I'm still in contact, and I still work with all the coaches I originally had. Like you said, Grant. So with Ryan, still with Lachlan, and my wrestling coach Chad, just adding to them. They all understood that I need to make certain adjustments in regards to my career and my life in order to be completely successful.
Mm-hmm. And you took off a good amount of time between fights. I think it's been 6 months it would be since December. Yeah, so was that a plan for you to take off that amount of time?
Yes and no. I thought I wanted to fight earlier, but the events in Canada worked out, and it made sense. Why not have my triumphant return to my winning ways a couple hours away from home?
Yeah, speaking of that, are you excited to be fighting in Ottawa?
I'm excited, yeah. I'm very excited to be fighting in Ottawa. I've been to the actual stadium. It's 10,000 large, but it's very intimate. It's kind of like the Goldilocks size. I've fought in small shows. I fought in as big as 29,000 in Texas when I took on Roger Nevares. And it's kind of in between. This is the Goldilocks. I'm excited. I have hundreds of people coming, all the way from Mississauga and Toronto. So the fact that I pretty much, I think 400 people are coming for Patrick Cote, but it's only 2 hours away. Well, I have a little half of that, and we're talking 4 hours.
Yeah. So you're a very active fighter on Twitter, switching topics. Did you ever end up getting a Twitter bonus when the UFC started handing those out?
No, well, they stopped doing that because, again, unfortunately, people bought a lot of bots, and it was just too hard. It became too hard to actually manage it. But there's a reason why I'm on the UFC Fight Pass main event. They appreciate, especially Eric Winter appreciates what I'm doing on social media, and it's working tenfold. Like, for instance, I got a million impressions in the last event, and every month I do about 4 or 5 million views.
Mm-hmm. And that's because you have a background in social media and marketing, right?
Creative advertising, University of Guelph. Yeah, like for the last little bit, I've been advertising the brand that is myself, and that goes beyond the internet and just in general. There's no coincidence that I quasi-coined. Well, obviously, my predecessor, Ken Flo, the best hair in MMA, but there's no coincidence why I'm pushing that.
Mm-hmm. And we actually have a couple of.
Let's be clear. It's obviously true.
We actually have a couple of Twitter questions for you. Let's see. Katie Reuter says, how are you doing your hair for the fight? I know this is really important for you.
Yes.
Cornrows, Canadian double braids. So what will we see in the octagon?
So you're going to see a full cornrows. Part of the actual confusion of the fight was I only did three rows, and what ended up happening was the man bun at the top that I wanted, but came apart. And during the fight, I got a lot of elbows in the back of the head, and I think that's part of the reason why I kind of was a little bit not as focused in certain parts against the cage because I was trying to look at the ref, but you couldn't see the fact that I was getting hit in the back of the head. I actually had to get 3-4 staples in the back of my head and stitches. So it's just one of those things where learning lesson. I'm going to get full cornrows, and I have a wicked song that I'm coming out to, which will be a surprise.
Wow, the journalist in me wants to know that. Can you give us a hint as to what the song's going to be?
It's my go-to in karaoke every single time, and it's the soundtrack of my life.
So it's not "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey, because that's my go-to.
Well, I never stop.
All right, and you kind of mentioned it before that you're on the Fight Pass prelims. What are your thoughts on that, and what do you think of the UFC branding you as a guy that they can go to for that type of thing?
No, yeah, I think especially now without the banners and obviously the ability to put your logos on anything. Fight Pass is a great venue to be focused on. With what the UFC puts marketing dollars into, and they're blowing it up. They have big plans for 2017, and I'm looking to be a part of it.
Nice. And you're facing a guy at UFC Ottawa, Sam Allenby, dangerous guy. Seems like you guys have kind of a funny relationship. You're having funny back and forths, but it doesn't seem like there's any animosity. Is it hard to punch a guy in the face who seems as nice as him?
No, not at all. We're both professionals. No, he seems like a nice dude. I'm very into just honestly creeping everything about someone. So I know all his pros and cons and all his injuries, all his what's called telltale signs. He's talked about many different podcasts of different regards to diminishing returns that just the mileage of having 30+ fights will do for you. So what's called after I kick his ass, I'm happy to buy him a beer.
Nice. And if I had to predict, I would say that you are going to get the knockout by jab or Superman punch. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly. It's about Superman punch, and no one wants to get booted in the face. You read my story on Lifeline?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely not that one. I had my I guess learning lessons from that. I think for the fight itself, I'm the more athletic individual, and I'm going to push the pace. He's very one-dimensional in regards to what he wants to do. He wants to knock my block off, and he's been really successful at it. He has 17 knockouts. But I think in many ways it's the class. It's due to a lot of the opponents just kind of walking into it. He has great reflexes, and he's able to capitalize on every inch you give him. He takes a mile, and that mile's your head.
Mm-hmm. And as Michael Bisping showed us, anybody can get the knockout. I'm going to let you go now, Elias. Thank you so much for joining us, and good luck at UFC Ottawa.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you.
Take care. All right, thank you, Elias, for joining the show. Again, it's special for me to have two people that are headlining their own parts of a card, so I'm very appreciative of Elias joining the show. And for those who found that awkward part when I said the Superman and jab thing and he talked about the story, what that was is Vice put out a story of Elias's first fight. And in one of his first fights, he was at a bar and a scrimmage happened and he got into a tussle and he tried throwing a Superman punch in that fight and he basically got destroyed because... don't throw a Superman punch in a bar fight, which was pretty much a lesson. He said he got his ass kicked, and that was an article from Vice. That's what I was mentioning. So, yeah. Anyways, this is pretty much the end of the show. I never know how to end shows. I think that we need to do like a segment to end the show. That's what everybody does. It's like a fan question segment or well, as the co-main event podcast does, Are You Fucking Kidding Me? Something along the lines of that. The Parting Shot, something like that. I don't really have an end yet. So we need to figure that out. But this show is a giant work in progress. We've changed titles over the past couple of weeks. And now for this show, I had 2 amazing guests. So I'm still not sure what I'm doing with the show, but we will figure that out. And also we haven't built up the audience to do fan questions, because I don't have fans yet. That's going to take a while to build up. Anyways, that's the end of the show. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Hutchinson. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I said last week that my Twitter handle was changed. I changed it back to the Mikey Hutch just because that's what people were knowing me as. So follow me on Twitter at the Mikey Hutch. Make sure to go to MMA Nation's YouTube channel every day for awesome MMA content. And as always, get the news from bloodyelbow.com. I'll have articles coming out this week. And maybe a little something special about Brock Lesnar. We'll see if I should do that for this week or just wait for UFC 200. But we have awesome stuff coming out. Karim Zidane, if you're not following his stuff on Bloody Elbow, I got to give a shout out to him. He's been doing amazing work, absolutely amazing work about the Russian MMA scene and all of the politics that are going on right now. Like, I'm not educated on that stuff. So follow him on Twitter. Read his articles because there's just so much going on. I can't even understand it all. And he says there's a lot more that's going to be coming out. So follow him, all of that stuff. Anyways, I'm rambling now. Thank you guys for watching the show. No show next week. We will have a show the week after that. Thanks for tuning in. See you later.